Frost between us. Olivia Bennett adjusted her glasses and tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear as she reviewed the quarterly reports one final time. Outside her glass-walled office cubicle, snow had been falling steadily since noon, blanketing Manhattan in white. At 7:30 p.m., she was the last one remaining on the 87th floor of Reed Enterprises. Well, besides him, Harrison Reed. Billionaire tech mogul, notorious perfectionist, and her boss for the past 3 years. The man whose impossible standards had reduced seasoned executives to tears, yet whose company had revolutionized sustainable energy storage across the globe. Ms. Bennett. His deep voice startled her. Harrison stood at her doorway, his 6'3" frame impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit despite the late hour. His steel gray eyes assessed her with their usual clinical detachment. The Nakamura proposal. Is it ready? Yes, Mr. Reed. I've just finished the final revisions. Olivia handed him the leather portfolio containing the documents that had kept her working late for the past week. Harrison flipped through the pages, his expression unchanged. You'll need to come with me to the Colorado facility tomorrow. The investors want an on-site presentation. Olivia blinked. Tomorrow? But the forecast. I'm aware of the weather. He cut her off. My pilot assures me we have a window to depart tonight before the system worsens. My helicopter is waiting. Pack what you need. We leave in 30 minutes. Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving no room for discussion. Typical. 3 years of working for Harrison Reed had taught Olivia that objections were futile. His world operated on precision and efficiency, with little regard for personal inconvenience. 2 hours later, the Reed Enterprises helicopter landed at his private mountain estate in Aspen. The property, a modern architectural marvel of glass and stone nestled among snow-covered pines, was meant to serve as their overnight accommodation before continuing to the facility tomorrow. The storm's accelerating faster than predicted, the pilot informed them as they disembarked. I need to get back to Denver now or risk being grounded for days. Harrison nodded. Go. We'll proceed to the facility once it clears. Olivia wheeled, her small suitcase through the grand entrance, trying not to gape at the soaring ceilings and panoramic views of the mountainside. She'd heard about this place, Harrison's private retreat, but had never expected to see it. Your room is upstairs, third door on the right, Harrison said, already engrossed in his phone. The housekeeper isn't here, but there should be everything you need. We'll review the presentation at 7 a.m. Yes, Mr. Reed. Olivia headed upstairs, exhaustion settling into her bones. By midnight, the gentle snowfall had transformed into a howling blizzard. Olivia stood at her bedroom window, watching the world disappear into white. Her phone buzzed with a weather alert. Severe storm warning. All roads closed. Estimated duration, 72 hours. A knock at her door made her jump. Harrison stood there, his usual crisp appearance slightly rumpled, his expression grim. The facility presentation has been postponed, he said flatly. The roads are impassable, and the internet connection is unstable due to the storm. We're completely cut off. Olivia's stomach tightened. For how long? 3 days minimum. His jaw clenched with irritation. We're stuck here, Ms. Bennett. Just the two of us. The wind howled outside as if emphasizing their isolation. Olivia swallowed hard, suddenly very aware that in 3 years of working closely with this man, she'd never once seen him in an uncontrolled situation. I understand, she said quietly. Harrison's eyes met hers, and for the briefest moment, something flickered in their depths. Uncertainty, perhaps, or resignation. Get some rest, he said finally. Tomorrow will be complicated. As he walked away, Olivia couldn't help but feel that complicated was a serious understatement. 3 days alone with Harrison Reed, the man whose emotional walls were higher and thicker than the mountains surrounding them. 3 days with a man she respected professionally, but had never truly known as a person. Little did she know that the raging storm outside was nothing compared to the tempest about to unfold within these walls. Thawing walls morning arrived with blinding whiteness. Olivia woke to a world transformed. Snow piled halfway up her window, the landscape beyond barely visible through the relentless blizzard. The digital clock on her nightstand flashed 7 a.m., reminding her that despite their predicament, Harrison Reed would expect punctuality. She dressed carefully in the business casual attire she'd packed for the facility visit, dark jeans and a cream cashmere sweater, and made her way downstairs. Bracing for Harrison's frustration at their circumstances, the main floor was silent. The great room with its wall of windows revealed nothing but swirling white beyond the glass. The modern kitchen, all sleek surfaces and high-end appliances, showed no signs of breakfast preparation. "Mr. Reed?" she called out, her voice echoing, in the empty space. No answer. Olivia found him in his home office, surrounded by 3 laptops, furiously typing. His usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and the shadow of stubble darkened his jaw. He'd exchanged his suit for a black cashmere sweater and dark jeans, an unintentional match to her own outfit that made her oddly self-conscious. "The satellite internet is working intermittently," he said without looking up. "I've been trying to reschedule everything, but communications are spotty at best." "Would you like some coffee?" Olivia offered, falling into her familiar assistant role. Harrison finally looked up, seeming almost surprised at her presence. "Yes, thank you." In the kitchen, Olivia explored the pantry, finding it well stocked with provisions. As she prepared the coffee, she could feel the tension radiating through the house. Harrison Reed was a man who controlled every aspect of his environment. Being trapped by nature was undoubtedly grating on his nerves. She returned with 2 mugs, placing one beside him. "I can prepare breakfast if you'd like." Harrison sat back, running a hand through his dark hair. "You're my executive assistant, Ms. Bennett, not my cook." "Under normal circumstances, yes," she replied evenly. "But these aren't normal circumstances, are they? And I do need to eat, so I might as well make enough for 2. Something like surprise flickered across his face, followed by the faintest hint of amusement. "Fair point." While preparing a simple breakfast of avocado toast and scrambled eggs, Olivia heard a strange mechanical groan followed by silence. The refrigerator's hum ceased, and the lights flickered once before going out completely. "Power's gone," Harrison announced, appearing in the kitchen doorway. "The generator should kick in momentarily." They waited. Nothing happened. Harrison disappeared into the lower level, returning 10 minutes later with a grim expression. "Generators malfunctioning. Must be the extreme cold. I have backup heating via the fireplaces, but we've lost electricity." Olivia processed this information, mentally cataloging what it meant. No internet, no cell service, no electric heating, no cooking appliances. Complete isolation. "At least the stove is gas," she said pragmatically, lighting the burner with a match to finish cooking their breakfast. They ate in silence at the massive dining table, the only sounds the howling wind and occasional creaking of the house as it withstood the storm's assault. Harrison remained distracted, clearly frustrated by his inability to work. "We have enough firewood for several days," he finally said. "But we should conserve heat by using only one fireplace. The great room makes the most sense." Olivia nodded. "I'll gather some blankets and supplies." By midday, they had created a functioning space in the great room. Olivia had found candles, battery-powered lanterns, and extra blankets. Harrison had built an impressive fire that cast a warm glow throughout the space, contrasting with the cold white light filtering through the windows. The transition was subtle. As the day progressed with no technology to distract them, the rigid formality between them began to soften by necessity. Harrison helped Olivia move cushions from the sofa to create comfortable seating near the fire. She showed him where she'd organized their food provisions for easy access. "You're surprisingly practical," he observed as she fashioned a makeshift clothesline near the fireplace for their snow-dampened outer layers. "I grew up in rural Vermont," she replied. Power outages were a regular winter occurrence. Harrison watched her work, a thoughtful expression on his face. "3 years as my assistant, and I never knew that about you." "You never asked," Olivia said simply. The statement hung between them, highlighting the strange imbalance of their relationship. She knew everything about him, his schedule, his preferences, his business dealings, yet he knew almost nothing about her. As evening approached, they prepared a cold dinner of cheese, crackers, and fruit. Harrison uncorked a bottle of wine from his collection, pouring 2 glasses. "To making the best of unfortunate circumstances," he said, offering her a glass. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and Olivia was surprised by the warmth of his hand. Somehow she'd always imagined Harrison Reed would be cold to the touch, like the persona he projected. The wind grew stronger as night fell, rattling the windows with alarming force. A particularly violent gust caused Olivia to startle, nearly spilling her wine. "The house is built to withstand much worse," Harrison assured her, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "We're safe here." The simple statement, "we're safe," created an unexpected shift in the atmosphere between them. For the first time, they weren't executive and assistant, but simply 2 people weathering a storm together. As the fire crackled and shadows danced across the walls, Harrison's phone battery finally died, his last connection to the outside world severed. He placed it down with a sigh that seemed to release something within him. "Tell me more about Vermont," he said, surprising her. "What was it like growing up there?" The question was so unexpected, so unlike their usual interactions, that Olivia found herself momentarily speechless. In the flickering firelight, Harrison's face appeared softer, his gray eyes reflecting golden flames instead of their usual steely determination. "It was beautiful," she began hesitantly. "Challenging in winter, but beautiful." As she spoke about her childhood home, Olivia noticed something extraordinary happening. Harrison Reed was listening. Not the perfunctory listening he did in meetings, but truly engaging with her words. More surprisingly, as the night deepened, around them he smiled. A genuine expression that transformed his face and made her wonder what other sides of himself he kept hidden from the world. Firelight confessions. Dawn of their second day brought no relief from the storm. If anything, the blizzard had intensified overnight, the wind howling with renewed vengeance against the walls of their shelter. Olivia had slept on the sofa in the great room, while Harrison had insisted on taking the floor nearby, both staying close to the fire's dying embers. She woke to find him already awake, stoking the fire back to life. The orange glow illuminated his profile, strong jaw, straight nose. The usual tension in his shoulders somehow diminished in the early morning light. "Sleep well?" he asked, noticing her stirring. "Better than expected," she replied, pulling the blanket closer around her shoulders. The house had grown colder overnight, their breath visible in the morning air. "You should have taken the couch." "I've slept in worse conditions," he said simply, adding another log to the fire. They fell into a surprisingly comfortable routine that morning. Harrison melted snow in a pot over the fire for washing, while Olivia organized their food supplies, rationing them in case the storm lasted longer than predicted. They worked together with an efficiency that came from years of professional collaboration. Yet something was different now. The rigid hierarchy between them had softened, necessity making them equals. By midday, the temperature in the great room had become almost pleasant, though the rest of the vast house remained frigid. They sat near the fire eating a lunch of canned soup warmed over the flames, the howling wind making conversation difficult without raising their voices. "We should bring down more blankets and pillows," Harrison said, glancing toward the wall of windows where snow continued to accumulate. "Tonight will be colder than last night." Olivia nodded, struck by the pragmatism of a man who normally had others handling such mundane concerns. As they gathered supplies from the upstairs bedrooms, she couldn't help noticing the personal touches throughout the house that contradicted Harrison's public image. A bookshelf filled with well-worn classics, black and white photographs of mountain landscapes, a vintage record player with an extensive vinyl collection. These weren't the status symbols of a tech billionaire, but glimpses of a more thoughtful, private person. "This is a beautiful home," she commented as they carried armloads of bedding downstairs. "Do you come here often?" Harrison paused at the bottom of the stairs. "Not as often as I'd like. Maybe 3 or 4 times a year." "It seems very you," she said carefully. He raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly is me, Ms. Bennett?" The formality of using her surname after their shared circumstances struck Olivia as absurd. and she couldn't suppress a small laugh. After sleeping 5 feet apart, maybe you could call me Olivia. The corner of his mouth twitched upward. Fair enough. Olivia. He seemed to test the name, as if speaking it was crossing some invisible boundary. And to answer your question, this place is more me than my Manhattan penthouse. It's the only property I designed myself. This revelation surprised her. I would have thought all your homes would be personal projects. The others are investments. This is... He paused, searching for the right word. A sanctuary. As afternoon faded into evening, they found themselves sitting on the floor near the fire, backs against the sofa, a chessboard between them. Harrison had discovered it in a cabinet, and Olivia had admitted to playing in college. Your move, he said, studying her with newfound interest after she'd captured his knight. Olivia contemplated the board, aware of his gaze. You seem surprised that I play. I'm surprised you play well, he corrected, then added, I shouldn't be. You've always been exceptionally competent. High praise from Harrison Reed, she said with a small smile, moving her bishop. I don't give praise lightly. You don't give praise at all, she countered, then immediately regretted her boldness. But Harrison didn't seem offended. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. A fair assessment. It's a habit from childhood. In my father's house, acknowledgement was reserved for extraordinary achievement. The personal admission hung in the air between them. Olivia remained silent, recognizing the rarity of Harrison volunteering personal information. Check, he said, moving his queen. Olivia studied the board, seeing her inevitable defeat in 3 moves. Your father sounds demanding. He built an empire from nothing, Harrison said, his voice taking on a distant quality. Failure wasn't an option in our family. Excellence was the minimum expectation. That sounds like a heavy burden for a child. Harrison's eyes met hers, something vulnerable flickering in their depths. It was, educational. As the chess game concluded with her defeat, Olivia rose to prepare their dinner, the last of the canned soup with crackers. The wind had reached a fever pitch outside, occasional gusts so strong they made the massive house creak and groan. Another storm system has merged with this one, Harrison explained, joining her by the fire. We could be here for 2 more days, at least. Olivia handed him a bowl. I've had worse company, she said lightly. The unexpected comment drew a genuine laugh from him, a rich, warm sound she'd never heard before. It transformed his face completely, erasing years of careful control. As have I, he replied, his eyes lingering on her face. As they ate, the conversation flowed more easily than Olivia would have thought possible. Harrison asked about her family, her education at NYU, her interests outside work. Simple questions that would be normal between acquaintances but felt monumental coming from a man who had never before expressed interest in her as a person. When she asked about his own family, in return, something in his expression closed off. My parents are both deceased, he said flatly. No siblings. I'm sorry, she said gently. How old were you when you lost them? Harrison stared into the fire, his profile sharp against the dancing flames. My mother died when I was 8. Cancer. My father, he hesitated. Heart attack 10 years ago. There was something in his voice when he mentioned his father, a complex emotion Olivia couldn't quite identify. You don't seem particularly saddened by his passing, she observed carefully. Harrison's gaze remained fixed on the flames. Richard, Reed was a brilliant businessman and a terrible father. His death left me a billion-dollar empire and a lifetime of unresolved issues. He spoke matter-of-factly without self-pity. Is that why you... Olivia trailed off, uncertain how to phrase her question. Why I what? He turned to look at her, his expression guarded yet curious. Why you keep everyone at a distance, she finished quietly. Why there's always this wall between you and the rest of the world. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken thoughts. Outside, the wind screamed through the mountain passes, while inside, the crackling fire cast shifting shadows across Harrison's face as he considered her words. Walls serve a purpose, he finally said, his voice low. They protect what's vulnerable. They also keep out what might heal, Olivia replied softly. Harrison's eyes met hers, filled with a complexity of emotion she'd never witnessed in him before. Pain, recognition, and something that might have been longing. Some things can't be healed, Olivia, he said, his use of her first name intimate in the firelit darkness. Some scars go too deep. The vulnerability in his admission created a shift between them, a moment of raw honesty that neither had expected. As the fire popped and sparked, casting their shadows against the wall, Olivia realized she was seeing the real Harrison Reed for the first time. Not the billionaire, not the boss, but the man beneath the carefully constructed facade. And something told her that very few people had ever been granted this privilege. Melting defenses. The third morning of their isolation dawned with an eerie silence. Olivia stirred from her makeshift bed on the sofa to find the howling wind had finally ceased. Through the wall of windows, a world of pristine white stretched endlessly, the snow so bright it hurt her eyes. Massive drifts had formed against the house, reaching halfway up the first-floor windows. Harrison was nowhere to be seen, but the fire had been recently stoked. She stretched, working out the kinks in her muscles from another night on the sofa. The house felt different somehow, warmer despite the continued lack of electricity, as if the walls themselves had absorbed some of the honesty shared between them the night before. She found Harrison in the kitchen, attempting to fashion a breakfast from their dwindling supplies. "Good morning," he said, glancing up at her approach. His usual formality had all but vanished, replaced by a casual ease that still felt new and unexpected. "Coffee isn't possible, but I found some tea bags we can steep in hot water from the fire." Olivia leaned against the doorframe, taking in the surreal sight of Harrison Reed, billionaire CEO, making do with primitive cooking methods. His hair was tousled, his jawline darkened with 3 days' stubble, the sleeves of his sweater pushed up to reveal strong forearms. He looked more human than she'd ever seen him. "The storm stopped," she observed. Harrison nodded. "But we're still snowed in. The road to the property won't be cleared for at least another day, possibly 2. At least we won't run out of water," Olivia said pragmatically, nodding toward the endless snow outside. Harrison's mouth quirked up in that almost smile she was beginning to recognize. "Always looking for the practical solution. It's one of your most valuable qualities." The compliment, delivered so casually, caught Olivia off guard. 3 days ago, such personal acknowledgement would have been unthinkable. They carried their simple breakfast, tea and the last of the crackers with peanut butter, back to the great room, settling into what had become their shared space. The fire crackled comfortingly and morning light streamed through the windows, creating rainbow prisms where it hit the crystal chandelier overhead. "I've been thinking," Harrison said after they'd eaten, "about what you said last night, about walls." Olivia looked up, surprised he was returning to such personal territory. "And?" Harrison studied his hands for a moment before meeting her gaze. "You were right. The walls I've built, they've kept out more than just pain." The admission seemed to cost him something, his voice rougher than usual. Olivia waited, sensing he had more to say. "After my mother died, my father became different, colder, more demanding." Harrison's eyes took on a distant look. He believed emotional attachment was weakness, that to succeed in business, in life, required absolute control. No vulnerabilities. No distractions. "That's a harsh lesson for a child," Olivia said softly. Harrison nodded. "By the time I realized what it had cost me, those walls were so ingrained I didn't know how to dismantle them." He gave a humorless laugh. 3 failed. Relationships later, I stopped trying. The personal revelation stunned Olivia. In the business world, Harrison's private life was the subject of endless speculation, but he had always maintained absolute privacy. "What about you?" he asked, clearly wanting to shift the focus. 3 years working together, and I've never seen you mention dating anyone." Olivia smiled wryly. "Working 80-hour weeks for a demanding boss doesn't leave much time for relationships." "Touché," Harrison acknowledged with a grimace. "Though that doesn't explain the 2 years before. You joined Reed Enterprises." She raised an eyebrow. You've looked into my past? I research all my executives thoroughly. I'm your assistant, not an executive, she pointed out. Harrison's gray eyes held hers steadily. You perform at an executive level, Olivia. Always have. I've simply been remiss in acknowledging it. The admission created a strange tension between them. For 3 years, their relationship had been clearly defined by professional boundaries. Now, those boundaries were blurring, leaving them in uncharted territory. To answer your question, Olivia said, redirecting the conversation, there was someone. It ended badly. He wanted me to be someone I'm not. Who did he want you to be? Harrison asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Less ambitious, more decorative. She shrugged. He called my career aspirations cute and assumed I'd eventually give them up to support his. Harrison's expression darkened. He sounds like an idiot. The blunt assessment startled a laugh out of her. He was. But it taught me something important. I won't compromise who I am for someone else's comfort. Harrison's eyes never left her face. That's not a lesson everyone learns. Something in his tone made her heart beat faster. The morning light illuminated his features, softening the hard lines of his face, highlighting flecks of blue in his gray eyes she'd never noticed before. Should we try to clear some of the snow? She suggested, suddenly needing physical activity to break the growing intensity between them. Outside, the world was transformed into a crystal wonderland. Trees bent under the weight of snow, icicles hung like crystal daggers from the eaves, and the sky stretched endlessly blue above them. Their breath fogged in the frigid air as they attempted to clear a path from the front door. The physical labor was welcome after days of confinement. They worked side by side, Harrison's strength making quick work of the heavier drifts while Olivia cleared the steps. When she slipped on a patch of ice, his hand shot out to steady her, strong fingers closing around her upper arm. Careful, he murmured, his face inches from hers. Time seemed to suspend as they stood frozen in that moment, her looking up into his face, him still holding her arm, the contact electric even through layers of clothing. Something shifted in Harrison's expression, his eyes darkening as they dropped briefly to her lips. Olivia felt herself swaying toward him, drawn by a force as inevitable as gravity. Then a cascade of snow slid from the roof with a dull thud, breaking the spell. Harrison released her arm and stepped back, clearing his throat. We should go inside, he said, his voice oddly rough, before we freeze. The remainder of the day passed in a strange dance of avoidance and awareness. They read books from Harrison's library, played another round of chess, and prepared a meal from the last of their provisions. Yet beneath their casual conversation ran an undercurrent of tension neither was willing to acknowledge. As evening approached, they sat before the fire, a respectable distance between them on the floor, backs against the sofa. Outside, stars emerged in a clear sky, the storm finally spent. The roads should be cleared by tomorrow afternoon, Harrison said, breaking a comfortable silence. We can return to New York by evening. Back to reality, Olivia murmured, surprised by the twinge of regret she felt. Harrison turned to look at her, firelight casting shadows across his features. Does that prospect disappoint you? The directness of the question demanded equal honesty in return. Parts of it do, she admitted. These days haven't been what I expected. No, he agreed softly. They haven't. In the silence that followed, Olivia gathered her courage. Harrison, what happens when we go back? Do we just pretend none of this happened? Return to Mr. Reed and Ms. Bennett as if we never... She trailed off, unsure how to define what had transpired between them. Is that what you want? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. No, she answered honestly. But I don't see how anything else is possible. You're my boss. There are complications. Harrison shifted to face her fully, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. Complications can be managed. Can they? She challenged gently. The man I've come to know here is different from the one who runs Reed Enterprises. Which one returns to New York tomorrow? The question hung between them, fraught with implication. Harrison's gaze remained steady on hers, something vulnerable and determined in his eyes. "That depends," he said finally, "on whether what's changed between us matters enough to find out." Heart pounding, Olivia realized they were standing at a precipice. Behind them lay the safe, familiar territory of their professional relationship. Before them, something unknown and potentially transformative. "It matters," she said softly. "But I won't be someone's secret, Harrison. I won't hide or apologize for feelings that aren't wrong." Harrison reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gentle gesture, so at odds with his usual reserve, made her breath catch. "I've spent my life hiding behind walls, Olivia," he said, his voice low. "I'm tired of it. Meeting you, knowing you. It's made me question everything I thought I needed to protect myself from." His hand lingered near her face, warm and hesitant. Olivia made the decision for both of them, closing the distance between them and pressing her lips to his. The kiss began tentatively, a careful exploration, but quickly deepened into something more urgent. Harrison's arms encircled her, drawing her closer as years of maintained distance collapsed in an instant. Her hands found his shoulders, feeling the solid strength beneath his sweater, the rapid beat of his heart matching her own. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, the look in Harrison's eyes contained wonder and uncertainty in equal measure. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted, his usual confidence nowhere in evidence. "I don't know how to let someone in." Olivia placed her hand against his cheek, feeling the rough texture of his stubble beneath her palm. "We figure it out together," she said simply. "One step at a time." As the fire burned low and stars wheeled overhead, they remained close, talking softly about possibilities and fears, about the complexities awaiting them beyond their snowy sanctuary. Nothing was resolved, nothing certain except the knowledge that whatever came next, neither of them would face it alone. Tomorrow would bring challenges, the return to their separate worlds, the navigation of professional boundaries, the inevitable scrutiny of others. But for tonight, in the dying firelight, they allowed themselves to simply be two people who had found something unexpected in each other, something worth the risk of vulnerability, something worth stepping beyond the safety of walls long maintained, something that felt remarkably like the beginning of love. Spring after winter. The first rays of morning light filtered through the great room windows, illuminating two figures nestled close beneath shared blankets. Olivia woke slowly, momentarily disoriented, until she felt Harrison's steady breathing beside her. They had talked long into the night, sharing hopes and fears, occasionally punctuating conversations with tentative kisses that grew more confident as the hours passed. Now, in the harsh clarity of daylight, reality began to reassert itself. In a few hours, they would leave this mountain sanctuary and return to the world below, a world of board meetings and office protocol, of public scrutiny and professional boundaries. Harrison stirred beside her, his eyes opening to meet hers. For a moment neither spoke, both aware of the crossroads before them. "Good morning," he said finally, his voice morning rough yet gentle. "Morning," she replied, suddenly shy despite the intimacy they'd shared. Harrison reached out, tracing her cheekbone with his thumb. "Having second thoughts?" "Practical thoughts," Olivia corrected, "about what happens next." Before he could respond, a distant mechanical rumble broke the silence. They both sat up, listening. "Snowplows," Harrison confirmed, moving to the window. "They're clearing the main road sooner than expected." The real world, it seemed, was eager to reclaim them. They moved through the morning with quiet efficiency, packing their few belongings, ensuring the fire was safely extinguished. The power remained out, but it hardly mattered now. In the kitchen, Harrison used the last of their water to make tea, handing Olivia a steaming mug. "I've been thinking about what you said last night," he said, leaning against the counter. "About which version of me returns to New York?" Olivia sipped her tea, waiting. "The truth is they're both me," he continued, "the driven CEO and He gestured vaguely between them. This person you've seen here. I've kept these parts of myself separate for so long, I'm not sure I know how to integrate them. Maybe you don't have to have all the answers right now, Olivia suggested. Maybe it's enough to be willing to try. Harrison studied her face, as if memorizing her features. When did you become so wise? I've always been wise, she replied with a small smile. You just never noticed. His laugh was warm and genuine, a sound she was still getting used to. I'm noticing now, he said softly. By noon, the snowplows had reached the private drive to Harrison's estate. Shortly after, his security team arrived with a four-wheel drive vehicle to transport them back to civilization. As they prepared to leave, standing in the great room one last time, Harrison took Olivia's hands in his. Before we go back, I need you to know something, he said, his expression serious. What happened here? What's happening between us? It isn't something I take lightly. Neither do I, she assured him. Then trust me to find a way forward, he said. It won't be simple, but I'm not willing to lose this connection because of corporate politics or public perception. With those words, they left their snowbound haven and descended the mountain, each lost in thought as they watched the winter landscape pass by outside the vehicle windows. 1 week later, Olivia sat at her desk at Reed Enterprises, reviewing her calendar for the day. The transition back to normal life had been complicated. On their return, Harrison had immediately been swept into crisis meetings, dealing with the backlog created by their absence. Olivia had resumed her role as his efficient assistant, the professional mask sliding back into place with practiced ease. To the outside observer, nothing had changed. But beneath the surface, everything was different. There were small signs only she would notice. Harrison's door, previously always closed, now remained ajar when she was the only one in the outer office. Coffee appeared on her desk each morning, prepared exactly as she liked it. Their communication, always efficient, now contained undercurrents of warmth that hadn't existed before. Yet they hadn't discussed what came next. The demands of catching up after their absence had left little time for personal conversations, and Olivia found herself wondering if their mountain connection would slowly fade, buried beneath the weight of corporate reality. Her intercom buzzed. Ms. Bennett, please bring the Takahashi proposal to my office. Harrison's voice was professional, giving nothing away. Olivia gathered the requested documents and walked the familiar path to his office, knocking briefly before entering. He sat behind his imposing desk, windows showcasing the Manhattan skyline behind him. Nothing in his demeanor suggested the intimacy they'd shared just days ago. The Takahashi files, she said, placing them on his desk. Thank you. He glanced through them, then looked up at her. Please, close the door. Olivia complied, her heart beating faster as she turned back to face him. I've been thinking about our situation, Harrison said, his tone still professionally neutral. It presents certain challenges. Disappointment washed through her. This was it. The moment he would explain why what happened in Colorado needed to remain there, why they needed to be practical, why the walls had to go back up. I understand, she said, keeping her voice steady. No, I don't think you do, Harrison replied, rising from his desk. I've spent the past week restructuring the executive team. The board approved the changes this morning. Confused, Olivia waited for him to continue. Effective immediately, Jennifer Zhao will be taking over as my executive assistant, he said, watching her reaction carefully. And you, Olivia Bennett, are being promoted to Director of Strategic Initiatives, reporting directly to the COO. Olivia blinked, processing his words. You're removing me as your assistant? I'm advancing your career while eliminating the direct reporting relationship between us, Harrison clarified, moving around the desk to stand before her, because I can't pursue a personal relationship with someone who reports directly to me. It would be ethically problematic and unfair to you. Understanding dawned. You're creating a path for us. I'm removing an obstacle, he corrected. The position suits your capabilities perfectly. something I should have recognized long before a blizzard forced me to see what was right in front of me. The professional distance he'd maintained cracked slightly, his expression softening. The promotion is based entirely on merit, documented in your performance reviews for the past 3 years. There will be no whispers of favoritism. You've thought of everything, Olivia said, a smile tugging at her lips. I've had time to consider what matters most, Harrison replied, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone, and what I'm willing to risk to pursue it. He took a step closer, still maintaining a respectable distance for their workplace setting. I meant what I said in Colorado. I don't know exactly how to do this, how to balance who I am as CEO with who I am when I'm with you, but I want to try. Emotion welled in Olivia's chest. So do I. Harrison glanced at his watch. Your new position starts tomorrow, which means, for the next 8 hours I'm still your boss, and this conversation is highly inappropriate. The formality of his statement contrasted with the warmth in his eyes, making Olivia smile. And after those 8 hours? She asked. After those 8 hours, I'd like to take you to dinner, he said. Somewhere quiet where we can talk properly, begin figuring out what comes next. I'd like that, she replied simply. 3 months later, spring had finally arrived in New York, melting the last remnants of winter from the city streets. Olivia stepped out of a taxi in front of an elegant restaurant in the West Village, where Harrison waited for her on the sidewalk. In the months since her promotion, they had navigated the complexities of their evolving relationship with careful deliberation. Professional boundaries remained intact at work, where Olivia was quickly making a name for herself in her new role. Outside the office, they were slowly building something neither had expected to find. You look beautiful, Harrison said as she approached, taking her hand and pressing a kiss to her knuckles. You're not so bad yourself, she replied, taking in his relaxed appearance. Tailored blazer over a casual shirt, no tie. The rigid CEO persona softened at the edges. Inside the restaurant, they were led to a private corner table. Harrison had become more comfortable with being seen together in public, though they still maintained a certain discretion. Not out of shame or secrecy, but out of respect for the newness of what they were building. I received an interesting call today, Harrison said after they'd ordered. The Colorado facility manager. Apparently they've finally repaired all the damage from the winter storms. Olivia smiled at the mention of Colorado. Perhaps we should visit, for business purposes, of course. Of course, Harrison agreed, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Though I was thinking more of a weekend trip to the mountain house, no business involved. The suggestion held significance, a deliberate return to where their story had begun, but this time by choice rather than circumstance. I'd like that, Olivia said softly. As their dinner arrived, Harrison reached across the table to take her hand. I've been thinking about what you said that night in Colorado, about walls keeping out what might heal. Olivia squeezed his fingers, remembering. And, you were right, he said simply. For years, I thought vulnerability was weakness, that keeping everyone at a distance was strength. It took being trapped in a blizzard with an extraordinary woman to make me realize how wrong I was. The candid admission touched her deeply. Over the past months, she had watched Harrison gradually lower his defenses, not just with her but in other aspects of his life. The company had flourished under his more balanced leadership, and for the first time in years, business publications were writing about Harrison Reed the visionary, rather than Harrison Reed the intimidating perfectionist. We all have our blizzards, Olivia said thoughtfully. Those unexpected moments that force us to see what we've been missing. Harrison's thumb traced patterns on her palm. The storm changed everything for me, but it wasn't the snow or the isolation. His gray eyes, once so cold, now held a warmth that never failed to move her. It was you, Olivia. You showed me what I'd been protecting myself from all along. And what was that, she asked, though she thought she knew the answer. The possibility of love, he said simply. Real, complicated, wonderful love. Outside the restaurant windows, spring blossoms drifted on the evening breeze. Nature's reminder. that after every winter comes renewal. For Harrison and Olivia, that renewal had begun in the most unexpected circumstances. A blizzard that had forced two people to see beyond the walls they'd built, to discover the warmth waiting on the other side. As they walked hand in hand through the Greenwich Village streets later that evening, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the rigid formality of boss and assistant to the deep connection they now shared, their path had been neither straight nor simple. There were still challenges ahead, balancing their professional and personal lives, navigating public scrutiny, learning to trust the fragile thing growing between them. But some things were certain. The man beside her was no longer just the intimidating billionaire she'd worked for. He was Harrison, complex, thoughtful, and still learning how to open his heart after keeping it closed for so long. And she was no longer just his efficient assistant, but Olivia, strong, compassionate, and brave enough to show him that vulnerability could be a source of strength rather than weakness. When Harrison stopped beneath a flowering cherry tree and pulled her close, Olivia went willingly into his embrace. His kiss held a promise that needed no words, that whatever came next, they would face it together. Some people found love in grand gestures or fairy tale meetings. Olivia and Harrison had found theirs in a blizzard, trapped together when all their careful distances collapsed. It wasn't a conventional beginning, but then, neither of them had ever been conventional people. "What are you thinking?" Harrison asked softly as they continued their walk, her hand secure in his. Olivia smiled up at him, at this man who had learned to lower his walls for her. "I'm thinking that sometimes being snowbound is exactly where you need to be." Harrison's answering smile was everything she'd once thought him incapable of, open, warm, and filled with promise. "In that case," he said, drawing her closer against the spring evening's chill, "I've never been more grateful for a storm." Above them, stars emerged in the darkening sky, witnessing the continuation of a story that had begun in winter's isolation, but would flourish in all the seasons to come. A reminder that sometimes the coldest storms can lead to the warmest beginnings.